They call me the teacher of righteousness, the leader of the sect known as the Essenes. Though in truth there is none righteous. Everyone has turned away, all have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Long ago, our land was conquered, our temple destroyed, our leaders taken captive to Babylonia. Then came the Persians, then the Greeks under Alexander, then the Ptolemies of Egypt, then the Seleucids of Syria. Though our temple was rebuilt, it was overseen by corrupt Zadokite priests, of the line of Aaron, but not of Moses' line. That is why we, who are called Essenes, withdrew from society and forged our way in the desert, making a pathway for the one who will come.
Of course, our great righteous teacher would not arrive to lead us for some time to come. In the meantime, our land was convulsed by war, a rebellion that broke out against the Seleucid king, Antiochus IV, who had imposed a great persecution upon his Jewish subjects. We Essenes, also known as Enochians, represented a distinct minority, yet we took advantage of the fact that the persecution was not aimed at all Judaism, only at Zadokite Judaism. The end of the Zadokite priesthood meant that we were able to win followers, many followers. All the while, we supported the pious ones among our people, known as the Hasidim, in opposition to Antiochus and the corrupt Hellenistic Jewish priest who served him, Menelaus.
My name is Judah, son of Mattathias. I come from a little town to the northwest of Jerusalem, on the border of Samaria, called Modi'in. Here, a certain Israelite priest had been ordered by a Syrian emissary to carry a pig to the slaughter. It was in compliance with an edict that every Israelite would have to consume a piece of swine flesh in order to renounce openly the faith of Abraham. This was the only way to escape the general persecution that had descended in full force. My elderly father, Mattathias, himself a priest, stood in the distance observing as his younger compatriot sheepishly complied. In a fit of rage he grabbed a spear close at hand and ran through both the Syrian and his fellow priest. He immediately called to his 5 sons, me and my brothers, and cried out to the whole town,
"Let all those who are fervent for the law and faithful to the covenant follow me."
We all headed to the hills to fast, to pray, and to await the inevitable onslaught of the enemy. Incredibly, our band of rebels proved victorious in battle after battle. We came to be called the Maccabees, after the Hebrew word meaning hammer, for we struck hammer blows into the Syrian phalanxes. We were joined by the pious ones, known as the Hasidim, 1,000 of whom had been massacred by Seleucid troops when they took refuge in caves. We fought together, side by side, until 3 years later, we entered the holy city. Ejecting the Seleucid occupiers, we found a despoiled temple, a defiled altar, and a golden 7-branched candle holder, a menorah that had long been extinguished. We wasted no time rebuilding a new altar, rekindling the menorah, and rededicating the sacred precincts. We commemorated our victory with a feast of rededication, a feast of lights, Hanukkah.
This is the background of the book of Daniel, which teaches that history, far from progressing toward a glorious future, is condemned to degeneration. In it, we start to see reflections of the apocalyptic worldview of the Essenes, or as some scholars call them, the Enochians. As far as we can tell, here was an entire branch of ancient Judaism in which the Torah, which was really the domain of the Zadokites, was not the central feature. Nor was Enochic Judaism about the fundamental concept of covenant, which became the bedrock of the Jewish faith. In short, the Zadokites emphasized Moses, and their Bible was the Torah. The early Essenes focused instead on the patriarch Enoch. Their Bible consisted of the 5 sections or booklets comprising the larger book of Enoch, which appears to date to Maccabean times, about 163 to 142 before the Common Era, though according to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, it was written even before the great Genesis flood. Two of those sections, referred to as the Dream Visions, also called the Book of Dreams, and the Animal Apocalypse, describe in cryptic symbolism the events touching Israel, including the Babylonian exile and what transpired after the return from exile.
The dream visions are at the center of the Judaism of us Enochians, at least early on. Among the Essenes, there has come to be much discussion over the concept of predestination. The righteous have been predetermined to be righteous from the foundation of the world. Likewise, the wicked have been so predestined from the very beginning. But in this sacred book, we see that the angels, who rebelled, still had free will. It was their choice to leave their divine abode, descend to the earth, and cohabit with human women. The race of giants who came about from this union were the direct consequence of their evil designs, which they hatched of their own accord.
The angels of your heavens have transgressed, and on mortal flesh shall your anger remain, until the day of the great judgment. Now then, O God, Lord and mighty King, I entreat you, and beseech you to grant my prayer, that a posterity may be left to me on earth, and that the whole human race may not perish, that the earth may not be left destitute, and destruction take place forever. O my Lord, let the race perish from off the earth which has offended you, but a righteous and upright race establish for a posterity forever. Hide not your face, O Lord, from the prayer of your servant.
It seems that the doctrine of predestination, which eventually became part of Christian tradition, evolved over time. It wasn't originally part of the Book of Enoch or Enochic Judaism in general, but it later came to feature prominently in Essene Judaism, as featured in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Amazingly, Aramaic fragments of the Book of Enoch were in fact found among the scrolls at a place we call today Qumran, along the western shore of the Dead Sea. They are among the most ancient of the scrolls. But later Dead Sea Scroll compositions say nothing about the sin of the angels, but instead focus on sin and evil as predestined from the beginning of the world. So it seems that later generations of Essenes still preserved the Book of Enoch, but slowly lost interest in it, as they developed the concept that both the righteous and the wicked are predestined as such by divine fiat. The dream visions in general pay much more attention to history than previous Enochic tradition. There's no Mosaic Torah mentioned at all, but instead we find prominent reference to the Maccabean revolt, which is viewed as the last chapter in a long process of degeneration. The Maccabees may have rescued the land from foreign rule, but in reality, the people are still in exile, an exile which will only end with the dawn of the Messianic age. As we zoom in on the other section of the Book of Enoch written at this time, the Animal Apocalypse, we find Enoch himself prophesying about an elect righteous group and likening them to a fold of lambs.
And look, lambs were born of those white sheep, and they began to open their eyes and to see and to cry out to the sheep. But they did not listen to them nor attend to their words. They were deaf, and their eyes were blind. And I saw in the vision that ravens flew upon those lambs and seized one of those lambs and dashed the sheep in pieces and devoured them. And I watched until horns came out on those lambs, and until a great horn sprouted on one of those sheep, and it looked on them, and their eyes were opened. And it cried out to the sheep, and the rams saw it, and they all ran to it. But all those eagles and vultures and ravens were still tearing the sheep in pieces and devouring them. And the sheep were silent, but the rams cried out. And those ravens were fighting and wished to do away with the horn, but they did not prevail against it. And I looked until that man came who wrote the names of the shepherds and brought them before the Lord of the sheep, and his help came down to that ram. And I watched until the Lord of the sheep came upon them in great anger, and all who saw him fled and fell into darkness before him.
Let me explain to you the meaning of this vision. The sheep represent the faithful of Israel, and the lambs are their leaders, who call out to the people for help and support. But the leaders, including the corrupt temple priesthood, the Zadokites, are blind and deaf and do not listen to them. The birds of prey are the Greek-Syrian tyrants, the Seleucids who visit persecution on the Israelites. From among the lambs, we Essenes would come forth. The horn that appears, by which the eyes of the sheep are opened, represents a great leader of our sect, who will be called the teacher of righteousness. Eventually, the righteous will be rewarded and the wicked punished. There shall come an anointed messianic leader, a future judgment and restoration, and a new Jerusalem.
And I saw a throne erected in a delectable land. Upon this sat the Lord of the sheep, who received all the sealed books, which were opened before him. Then the Lord called the first 7 white ones, and commanded them to bring before him the first of the first stars, which preceded the stars whose form partly resembled that of horses, the first star, which fell down first, and they brought them all before him. And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, who was one of the 7 white ones, saying, Take those 70 shepherds, to whom I delivered up the sheep, and who receiving them killed more of them than I commanded. Behold, I saw them all bound, and all standing before him. First came on the trial of the stars, which, being judged, and found guilty, went to the place of punishment. They thrust them into a place, deep, and full of flaming fire, and full of pillars of fire. Then the 70 shepherds were judged, and being found guilty, were thrust into the flaming abyss.
There is, of course, much more to these holy books of visions and dreams. The animal apocalypse depicts sin and evil as a kind of disease carried in the blood. Ever since the rebellious angels left their holy abode and came to earth, cohabiting with human women. This sin has changed and continues to change the character of the sons of men.
We find in all of this a harsh denunciation of the Judaism of the Zadokites, containing no reference to the Zadokite concept of covenant, and not even reference to the Torah, nor is there reference to Antiochus or the corrupt high priest Menelaus, since the temple had already been contaminated. Instead, the book looks ahead to God coming to earth to build a new holy house, the center of a new creation.
In those days oppression shall be cut off from its roots, and iniquity with fraud shall be eradicated, perishing from under heaven. Every place of strength shall be surrendered with its inhabitants. With fire shall it be burnt. They shall be brought from every part of the earth, and be cast into a judgment of fire. They shall perish in wrath, and by a judgment overpowering them forever. Righteousness shall be raised up from slumber, and wisdom shall be raised up, and conferred upon them. Then shall the roots of iniquity be cut off, sinners perish by the sword, and blasphemers be annihilated everywhere. Those who meditate oppression, and those who blaspheme, by the sword shall perish. And I stood up to see, till they folded up that old house, and carried off all the pillars, and all the beams and ornaments of the house were at the same time folded up with it, and they carried it off and laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep brought a new house, greater and loftier than that first, and set it up in the place of the first which had been folded up. All its pillars were new, and its ornaments were new and larger than those of the first, the old one which he had taken away, and all the sheep were within it.
We see in all this a militant activism combined with eschatological hope that all will be put right in the end of days. Evil will be vanquished, the earth will be restored. Enochic Essene Judaism would develop these ideas, this faith, over several centuries. There's so much more to come.